Hello everyone and welcome back to another Arsenal video, and this one I want to focus on is the latest situation, people, with regards to injuries, updates and availability of the squad as we move forward post this international break. Now, reason for doing this video is obviously the news that just broke in the last 24 hours that Bukayo Saka has been withdrawn from the England squad for these upcoming friendlies against Brazil and Belgium. And it's said that there is a minor muscle injury and that it's a precaution, and he's going to return to Arsenal for his continued rehabilitation. And that also followed on from Gabriel Magalhaes' withdrawal from the Brazil squad, also for a precautionary injury with an Achilles issue. So obviously, people, we don't know the full extent of these injuries, but reading between the lines, they don't sound too serious, because in both cases they've been labelled as precautionary. And just for starters, people, I'm really heartened to see a slightly different approach from the Arsenal management, Mikel Arteta, towards player management, and in particular how we manage the load and the minutes and the activity of the players in competitive fixtures. And obviously friendlies aren't technically competitive, but they're still fixtures that carry a degree of strain, a degree of outlay, a degree of potential for injury. So they are risks putting your players forward for these international matches, and especially where we're at in the season in March, at such a pivotal point of the Premier League and European Champions League season. It feels like these international breaks do come at a really sticky time when players are probably already tired. And I think these extra 10 days that Gabriel and Saka are going to get now as a result of being withdrawn from the squad is going to be beneficial for them in the short to medium term for the rest of this season. So if this is an Arteta decision, for me it indicates these learning lessons, because one of the things that I believe about Arteta from the two previous campaigns that we had, one being the 5th place finish in the 21-22 campaign, just losing out to Tottenham in the Champions League race, and then the other one being the title charge last year where we just fell short and finished second to Man City. One common denominator from both of those seasons was perhaps a degree of physical fatigue towards the end of the season, particularly from players in the more forward positions, perhaps Saka being one of those. And there was a debate earlier this season about how well Arteta was managing Saka in terms of the number of minutes he was playing. He always seemed to play Saka for 90 minutes, and this came to a head, I believe, when Saka was taken off, substituted in a European match earlier this season. I think it was against Lens away when we lost 2-1. And because there'd been a lot of debate going into that game, because I believe Saka had also been taken off in other matches with knocks. So there was nothing in terms of a chronic or an injury that had occurred through strain and wear and tear. It was more of an impact injury. But nevertheless, there was still a debate around that time that was Arteta overplaying Saka. So for him to take this step, and I think it's probably an Arteta-inspired decision, but maybe it's an England decision, because the quotes did come out of the FA. So it's tricky to sort of pinpoint exactly who's been responsible for this decision. Has it come from Saka himself? But whichever way, I'm pleased that there's been more of a dialogue this time around between Arteta, Arsenal in general, and the England camp in relation to Saka, because I remember, people, last March Saka played, I believe, 90 minutes in both the games, and I was thinking Southgate was really hanging him out to dry there and risking fatigue, and ultimately we did see some of that in that last 10 games of last season. So for me, this is one of those decisions where I feel like a sensible approach has been taken. And it's the same with Gabriel. I think getting back to the Arsenal base, we can really go from there. he can do his rehabilitation work. Because another aspect of all this, people, is during the winter break earlier this season in January, I did feel that we benefited from having a close-knit group, just doing a little bit of light training, strategy work, a bit of rest, getting everyone together so Arteta could keep an eye on everyone's energy levels, on their athleticism levels in terms of how they were responding to various physical fitness tests and whether they were carrying any knocks. So I think to have more of Arsenal's playing staff back in North London with Arteta at the Arsenal base, it just shows for me that it's a positive sign, I think. It's a positive sign that communication is clearly being had between the different international bodies, and ultimately we want the best for the players and we want to see them recovering in the least risky environment and the least strenuous environment. And because in all the furore surrounding the Ben White conversation that resulted from his choice to not make himself available for the England squad, one aspect that I think was interesting and perhaps is a positive in one respect is Gareth Southgate, in his quote, he said, "We received a call from Edu." Now, Edu, obviously Arsenal's sporting director, is a very central figure at Arsenal. Often, very obviously, he oversees the incoming, so the transfers. So he does very close work with agents in terms of negotiating prices, fees, having conversations with the player, making them aware of what Arsenal offers before they decide to sign a contract. And I think the fact, I'll come on to that more in a second, but just back on the Southgate conversation with Edu, the fact that Southgate received a call from Edu, I think was a good sign, because it shows that Edu is wanting to have a open and transparent dialogue with the international managers. And I think the more that happens, the better. And the more he can relay the wants and the desires and the situations of the players, the more Southgate hopefully can take that on board, or whichever international manager, and say, okay, we might need to manage this player in a particular way. So that was one aspect that did catch my attention, the fact that Edu and Southgate, or Southgate's representative, whoever it may have been, had a direct conversation on the phone. And that leads me to the broader point about Edu, people. I just feel like Edu, his role at the club cannot be overstated, because I just think not only has he done a very solid job in terms of the acquisitions, the signings that Arsenal have made. So I think this summer we signed Declan Rice, Stewie and Timber, who we're going to come on to talk about in a second, but unfortunately had that serious knee injury early in the season. And Kai Havertz, David Raya. Obviously, you look at the three signings that have appeared this season. You go Rice, Havertz and Raya. They've all been hits. They really have. And part of that has been the communication Edu and Arteta have, their close-knit relationship, able to identify the needs of the positions that we're short on, the type of player we want in terms of stylistically, and then Edu's people skills. He's obviously got tremendous people skills in terms of being able to have that human-to-human conversation with someone, make them feel like they want to, or make them aware of the Arsenal project. And it often leads to the player being encouraged to join Arsenal. Like we think of Declan Rice and his quotes before coming to the club, and he cited just the project and Arteta and wanting to work for Arteta, and that's not just Arteta. I think, and that's where I want to give credit to Edu. It's the support network around Arteta. It's the feeling of unity and cohesion that our think tank has. And I think when a player is considering whether to come to Arsenal, if they're seeing a well-aligned, a harmonious relationship at the decision-making level be it management or board, then it's only going to persuade them a little more that they want to be part of this project, because everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet. And we can see in life, everything flows down from the top. If there's a solid structure and a foundation and a coherence and a sense of unity, as I mentioned, people, from that hierarchy at the top, then it's going to filter down into how the players communicate to each other, how the fans are thought of and considered in terms of the players' relationship with them. So I feel there's more to these withdrawals than meets the eye here with Saka and Gabriel. It's also indicative of a very caring and wholesome approach from the hierarchy, that they have the best interests of the players at heart, and also that they're learning lessons. They really are learning lessons from what we've seen in previous seasons where maybe players have been overplayed. So just moving on, people, a little bit to talk about Timber and Martinelli, because moving into this next match on the 31st of March, Easter Sunday, against Man City, we obviously have these, I guess, 4 injury question marks now, with obviously Saka and Gabriel being withdrawn, but also Timber and Martinelli. So on his press conference before the win over Porto, there's a quote here that Arteta says, "There aren't many updates in terms of news about Timber and Martinelli. We're trying to have everybody fit and available." So he's not giving anything away in terms of specifics, in terms of the timelines and how each individual is tracking and the various phases of their rehabilitation. But what he is saying is that there is proactive work being done to try and get everyone ready. And I think that's the right message. So he's keeping an open mind here, people. We saw that Timber was included in the Champions League squad for the knockout phases, and that's a good sign, because I think to have Timber back would just be the biggest boost in the world, to be honest. Because if we think back to the pre-season tour of the United States, the Community Shield match against Man City, he just looked so assured and so comfortable on the ball and so natural in that inverting role, stepping in from either left or right back into that midfield. He had amazing agility and ability to turn one way and then the other. So often he was able to outmaneuver players and create space for himself, and he had an eye for a pass as well, not to mention his defensive side of his game, a number of key blocks that he was putting in there in some of those matches. So to have Timber back would be a big boost, and that quote from Arteta